So recently, I finished watching this web series called Squid Game. I'm pretty sure most of you know about it. It is currently one of the #1 shows in the whole world. It has been translated in over 31 languages and is trending #1 in over 90 countries. This is a show that involves literal physical and psychological torture, where all the characters are made to navigate through a childhood nightmare to fight for their lives. The kind of inquisitive person I am, after finishing the show, I went online to know more about the show and to see what opinion other people have about the show. What I got to know was quite strange and a bit disheartening for me personally. I saw that the current hot topic about the show was not the plot itself, but rather more people were talking about the translation of the show from Korean to other languages. Since Squid Game was released on September 17th, many Korean Americans like Youngmi Mir took it to TikTok to share their passionate opinion about the mistranslated dialogues in the English subbed and the English dubbed versions of the show. Here is a tweet which Youngmi Mir recently made regarding Squid Games. Through a series of TikTok videos, Youngmi went out to explain how much of the meaning of the dialogues is lost in translation. Let me give you one example. She breaks down a scene from episode 6, where the character Minyo is trying to convince the other players to let her join their team. What she actually says is, "I'm really smart. I just never got the chance to study." But what the translated text says is, "I never bothered to study, but I'm unbelievably smart." Not having the opportunity to study and not being bothered enough to completely changes the character arc. Not only that, but it's also supposed to tell a social and economic history of the country. Minyo's character is supposed to illustrate the elitist attitudes and the classism that prevail in society. All of that was lost in bad English translation. Now you can understand why I was disheartened. I'd completely misunderstood one of the characters of such a good show. Wrong. A very good morning, everyone. Today I will be talking about language, communication, and opinions. 3 different topics, distinctly flavored by culture and diversity, yet intrinsically connected to each other. Miscommunicated opinions through insensitive language, and you may have offended a particular community. Today's world is conscious about being politically correct, and rightly so. Let us begin with the decimation of the 3 topics. Language, something that we use in our everyday lives, yet we seldom think about it. It's a distinctly human activity that aids in the transmission of feelings and thoughts from one person to another. Language helps us to express our thoughts and opinions to other people through sounds and gestures which convey a certain meaning. Where language is a tool, communication is an experience. Effective communication is needed for any group to function properly. Effective communication does not only depend on language, but also the way the words are expressed, the body language, the gestures, and even vibe. Now, communication and language together help us express our opinions to other people. And we all have opinions. It's a very human thing. But the question is not about having opinions, but rather being able to voice it. That is exactly what language helps us in doing. But here is where we face one of the biggest obstacles in a path to a globalized world: language barrier. As you saw from my example of Squid Game, language barrier is an obstacle that we are still facing, even with such technological advancement and skills. Well, in the late 1800s, auxiliary languages was a proposed solution to help us break the language barrier, which we still use till date to help us break the language barrier. But is this really enough to solve our problem? Let us take a look at India only. For the past many years, we have been trying to introduce English in every school throughout the country. Yet, it is estimated that only 14% of the total population of India is able to speak English properly, whereas our average literacy rate of the whole country is about 75%. So this method is definitely not going to help us break the language barrier. We are living in an increasingly globalized world where people are increasingly connected. So, in such a multilingual setting, a problem like language barrier is a significant hassle in our path to internationalism. Now, you may say we have specialized softwares and translators which can easily help us break the language barrier, but that is not the case. Though these translators have accuracy levels ranging from 85 to 90%, all it does is literally translate text. A language is much more that can be expressed through words, through gestures, the pronunciation of the words, the meaning of the sentence can completely change. Let me give you an example of what I really mean. Take this word in Bengali called Godhuli. If you put it through any translator, the meaning that you will get is twilight. It is not wrong, but it is not quite right either. The real meaning of Godhuli is a bit more complex. During the sunset, when the herds of cows return home, blowing the red soil that is found in Bengal's lands into the wind, the light reflecting upon the setting and creating a reddish-orangish glow is what the real meaning of Godhuli is. No translator will give you this meaning. Only a person of true Bengali origin knows what the actual meaning is. Then we have this next word called Tishnagi, which is an Urdu word. This word has no English translation, not a single word which can be called its literal English translation. This one single word has a world full of poetry and expression captivated inside it. A few meanings in English which can be said is, it can be called as desire, inexpressiveness, or something that is left incomplete. Then we have this word aap in Hindi, which means to address the elders with respect. Again, this word has no English equivalent. Now let us come to a second barrier in communicating one's opinion: cultural barrier. Culture and geographical diversity is the reason why we have so many different languages throughout the world. Culture is something that is passed on from one generation to another. It is the way people have their own way to interpret the world and interpret life. Cultural diversity can cause communication problems because the mindset of people of different cultures are different. The signs, the language, and the symbols are also different. While talking about cultural barrier, we need to keep a few things in mind, such as prejudices and stereotypes. One of the most common examples of stereotypes are that Asian students are stereotyped to be good at math. Though a positive stereotype, it's a sweeping generalization. Then we have cultural stereotypes of a particular religion, like Islam being violent, which is a heavily negative example of stereotyping. Negative stereotyping is what we need to get rid of because it causes judgmental attitudes and those cultures as sins by people. Media and political agenda are responsible for propagating these things. And these cultures, because of this, have communication barriers and they are not allowed to express their opinions to other people. So we need to keep in mind that culture is the way that forms the people think and behave. Nelson Mandela has put this in a quote through his beautiful words. He said, "If you talk to a man in a language that he understands, that goes to his head. But if you talk to a man in his language, that goes to his heart." Keeping this in mind, we need to solve the problems of cultural barriers. Now, there are different concepts in different languages and cultures, which may be completely absent in other cultures. This is because all cultures have developed in different environments and ultimately making them think differently. So, you can translate a conversation from an unknown language to one you know, but you may never know what it truly means. Now, I've stated a few barriers, both from linguistic and cultural aspects. Now, what is the solution to all of this? How do we remove this cultural and language barrier? One of the first things that we need to start with is intercultural understanding and respect for each other's culture. Without intercultural understanding between two people or two groups of different culture, they can never come on a common ground for good communication. And we need to inculcate this into kids from an early age. Kids need to learn how to accept differences, how to accept different cultures, and how to be welcoming to different opinions. And this should be a mandatory aspect of school life. The next thing that we can do is to reform our education system to become multilingual, as we do have now, but we have to increase the number of languages that we teach in schools. Not only that, but we have to also reform the way the languages are taught. Instead of just memorizing words and building a vocabulary, we should recreate those environments in which the native people have lived so that the students can grasp those unique concepts in different cultures, which otherwise they would be incapable of doing. Also, we need to make sure that the students have regular conversations with the native people. This would expose them more to the language, and though in the short term the conversations will be futile, but in the long term it will give them the confidence to speak the language more fluently. But what is the point of all of this? We know that there are over 2,000 different languages around the world. How will just learning a few of them help in the broader spectrum? Well, we must remember, though there is geographical diversity, cultural diversity, and language diversity, they have all common origins. That also means they have a common cultural origin. So there are many concepts which are interlinked between different cultures. So if we know just a few different languages from both cultural and linguistic approach, then we will be able to communicate with people, even though there will be differences. But our shared human mind would act as a bridge to connect our thoughts and expose us to even more concepts unknown. I would like to end my speech with the very relevant quote from Stephen Hawking. For millions of years, mankind lived just like the animals. But then something happened which unleashed our imagination. We learned to talk, we learned to listen. Speech has given us the way to communicate ideas, and because of that, man has achieved the impossible. Mankind's greatest achievements have come about by talking, and its greatest failures by not talking. It doesn't have to be like this. Our future hopes could become our future reality. All that we need to do is to keep talking, talking, talking. Thank you.